To the General Command I give this order. Russia's military presence in Syria has come to an end. The motherland awaits you, friends.
They took soil samples which show the lack of nerve agent and chlorine-containing substances. In interviews, not a single local resident confirmed the chemical attack having taken place.
They would bring cameras and explosives, something to destroy, for example, this building here. They'd find people in the streets and promise them money or food to say whatever they needed.
The Interfax news agency said Israeli warplanes had carried out the strikes from Lebanese airspace.
I'd like to begin by condemning the heinous attack on innocent Syrians with banned chemical weapons. If it's Russia, if it's Syria, if it's Iran, if it's all of them together, we'll figure it out.
This is not acceptable, and frankly, Russians and Iranians get the message that their support for Bashar Assad cannot stand if he continues to do this activity.
I'm in awe, Vasily, of how you say what you say with a straight face. I really am. We should discuss today is the use of deadly chemical weapons to murder innocent Syrian civilians. Instead, we should be condemning the country that unilaterally has stopped the Security Council from upholding this principle. Who is it on the Council that most exhibits unilateralism when it comes to chemical weapons? It is Russia alone that has stopped at nothing to defend the Syrian regime's multiple uses of chemical weapons. This meeting should not be about the so-called unilateral threats. It should be about the multiple actions Russia has taken to bring us to this point. Assad's most recent use of poison gas against the people of Douma was not his first, second, third, or even 49th use of chemical weapons. The United States estimates that Assad has used chemical weapons in the Syrian war at least 50 times. Public estimates are as high as 200. And thanks to Russia, there was no UN body to determine blame.
Why are you seeking to plunge the Middle East into such difficulties, provoking one conflict after another, pitting one state against another? The pretext is the alleged use of chemical substances in the Syrian city of Douma on 7 April. There is no credible confirmation of this. Our specialists found no traces of toxic substance use. All information about the alleged attack have been provided by the anti-government forces who have an interest in such a development of events. We have weighty justification to believe, and we have even information to believe, that what took place was a provocation with the participation of certain countries' intelligence services. However, certain types of terrorists have always been sheltered by you to combat the regime and for you to advance your geopolitical priorities in the region.
There have been allegations stated by the West against the Syrian government, saying that the Syrian government has used chemical weapons against the population of Syria. But up until this point, there has been no evidence presented by the West to lay some basis for the fact that there has been actually a chemical attack. We believe that there has been a provocation in order to provoke the US to make a strike against Syria. We have been able to find people in this clip, and these people will be telling in details how they were filmed, what they did, and how all of this operation was staged.
My fellow Americans, a short time ago, I ordered the United States Armed Forces to launch precision strikes on targets associated with the chemical weapons capabilities of Syrian dictator Bashar al-Assad.
This evening, I have authorised British Armed Forces to conduct coordinated and targeted strikes to degrade the Syrian regime's chemical weapons capability and deter their use. The Russians vetoed a resolution at the UN Security Council which would have established an independent investigation into the Duma attack.
Let's talk a bit about the fallout after the strike on Syria. It's been a few interesting days, of course, as we know, guys. I mean, all of this has been based on lies. There's been no proof whatsoever that the Syrian government, that Assad directed his army to drop chlorine, poisonous chlorine gas on people in Duma. There's just no proof for it. The US, UK, and France, of course, did perform these strikes. Macron and May back home in their respective countries have faced incredible criticism for this. And of course, the fallout from this has been very interesting to watch. There's been the talk of sanctions against Russia. This is another thing that hasn't actually manifested itself. Trump actually pulled back on this. He declined to add sanctions against Russia, and actually contradicting Nikki Haley, who talked that this will be the fierce line that the US is going to push. Very curious why they have done this and why Trump seems to go, if you will, back and forth on this issue. But the sanctions issue to the side, there have been no proof that Syria did this, and that's the most important point. And there has been actually independent sources that have come to this conclusion as well. One of them is, of course, noted journalist Robert Fisk. I don't know if you know about him. He's been an anti-war activist for many, many years. He wrote a piece for The Independent here just yesterday, "The Search for Truth in the Rubble of Duma, and One Doctor's Doubt Over the Chemical Attack." But he is, of course, not the only one. There have also been American and British reporters that actually have managed to reach Duma for themselves and discover that there was no chemical attack. There is one out of the OAN network in America, independent journalist, that went there to talk with some people as well. Let's listen to what he had to say about this.
When I asked them what they thought the chemical attack was, they told me, all of them told me that it was staged by the rebels who were occupying the town at that time. They said that it was a fabrication, that it was a hoax, and when I asked them why, they told me that it was because the rebels were desperate and they needed a ploy to help get the Syrian army off their back so that they can escape. And so the residents told me, and again, I'm using that phrase a lot, the residents told me, because I want it to be clear that this is not an opinion, this is not propaganda, as some have accused, that this is simply facts that we found on the ground when we were in the town. Things that we saw firsthand.
So I recommend you go and check out the whole interview. It's about 10 minutes long on the OAN network, and it's super important that we have independent people like this that can actually get on location, talk with people, and they're outside, of course, of the mainstream kind of mouthpiece, just propagandist media that we're suffering from here. They're just completely verbatim is releasing reports out of the Pentagon. I mean, when did the media just become these mouthpieces for the state and for the military and everything like that? They used to have an idea of finding out and investigative journalism and go in there and whatever, but these days it's independent alternative media that's doing this. But he's not the only one. There's others as well. It's the former UK ambassador, for example, to Syria that mentioned in a radio interview with BBC Radio Scotland that this most likely was a staged incident. Very, very interesting. So the way that this has kind of played out, well, let's look at the beginning from this. There's many aspects of what we should cover and break down to try to just kind of backtrack and see how this whole thing enabled itself, what led to this point, right? And I have to say that the most annoying person to watch in all of this so far has been Nikki Haley, the UN ambassador, of course. And she is the one who's on the Security Council. And she's the one who's been pushing all these lies. I mean, Nikki Haley has just been the worst propagandist in all of this. And the way she's twisted the words and, skewed and turned everything around. It's been absolutely aggravating and horrendous to watch and witness this. So I propose that we take a look at some of this for ourselves.
I'm in awe, Vasily, of how you say what you say with a straight face. What we should discuss today is the use of deadly chemical weapons to murder innocent Syrian civilians. We should be condemning the country that unilaterally has stopped the Security Council from upholding this principle. Who is it on the Council that most exhibits unilateralism when it comes to chemical weapons? It is Russia alone that has stopped at nothing to defend the Syrian regime's multiple uses of chemical weapons. This meeting should not be about the so-called unilateral threats. It should be about the multiple actions Russia has taken to bring us to this point. Assad's most recent use of poison gas against the people of Douma was not his first, second, third, or even 49th use of chemical weapons. The United States estimates that Assad has used chemical weapons in the Syrian war at least 50 times. Public estimates are as high as 200. And thanks to Russia, there was no UN body to determine blame.
Right, so listen to that. They've shifted. Everything has shifted over to Russia. It's been like basically going from the Syria, that gassed, their own people and stuff like that, or Assad gasses some people, over to, actually it's Russia that's responsible. They're the ones to blame for this. They basically enabled. They're the ones who gassed innocent children in Syria. She is just such a disgusting worm tongue, this creature, to be honest. The way that she's lying, the way she's fabricating, making this up, and obviously she has talented speechwriters. There's no doubt about it. It's taking the claims and in a attorney lawyer kind of way, twisting them. I don't know if those two, which look like twin brothers behind her there, are the speech writers. One of the guys sits with a little pen in there indicating he's a writer, right? He writes things. We'll look at one of her writers here in a moment. But Nikki Haley, she's of course the governor, South Carolina, governor or state? Yeah, not senator or anything like that. No, I think it's governor. She was of the state of South Carolina. And of course, in case you didn't know, her real name is Nimrata Randhawa. She's actually from Punjab in India. Her parents came to America. They were actually very wealthy. They were well off. And she came to America, or they came to America, because they wanted to give Nikki and her sister, and I think one or two of her brothers, a better start in life, basically. So, they needed to go to America. And so here's Nikki, being sworn in right here. But she has been incredibly annoying to watch. And she has, of course, been very, very active in, or a very, very big part of this whole scheme of how to twist things not only against Russia, but how to basically, in a way, make it sound like Syria is responsible without actually offering any proof or any evidence. Nothing of what Nikki Haley has said has actually presented any proof. It's circumstantial. It is basically that we are basing this off of good intelligence. The UK came to the same conclusion. France came to the same conclusion. But show us what you have found then. What have you actually found? It's the most absurd ways that they've twisted the logic behind this. And in these UN Security Council meetings, she is just, she's unbelievable in her lies and the way she's twisting and turning all of this and blaming it over on Russia. And they've been very sensible and rational in this situation. And as we know, Russia has been one of the few sources that have been willing to go onto location at this point and actually doing investigations for themselves. So this is, beyond what some of these other independent people who we've been looking at, what they have actually done. So what's happened here in the last 24 hours or so is regarding the OPCW, right? That there's basically been accusations on both sides, from Russia and then from America and the UK-France kind of coalition, that there has been, they have basically covered things up. And this is very interesting because it started basically with Russia going onto location and finding no evidence of the chemical attack. What the Western, media and what the Pentagon and France in this case also have come back with is that Russia removed evidence when they came onto location, right? So that the the evidence has now been disappeared. So now they're starting with these conspiracy theories all of their own. I mean, and keep in mind the way that Nikki Haley has been pushing this. It's for the below 100 IQ person. This sounds reasonable what she's saying. If you pick it apart, it doesn't. If you're a lawyer, or if you can see how she's reasoning this, and in the way that it's presented, you realize that it's not based on anything. It's not actually presenting evidence that states this. It's all circumstantial. Assad couldn't, or the rebels couldn't have done it because they didn't have access to chemical weapons. That's a lie. We know that that's been exposed way back when. Specifically, Jaish al-Islam, who controlled the Duma, the town of Duma in eastern Ghouta, they were actually the ones who did have access to this kind of stuff. But anyway, the latest is that the Syria chemical attack, France is now saying the evidence is likely disappearing from the Duma site ahead of inspectors' visits, right? So they were slated, of course, the OPCW were slated to visit the site before the airstrikes. But what happened, of course, is that America couldn't wait. They couldn't hold their horses. And they, together with France and the UK, they fired all their missiles at these 3 locations. We'll look at these later. But now they're saying that Russia and Syria is refusing to allow them access. And supposedly they're doing this so that they can cover things up, right? That it turns out that, it did actually happen. It turns out it was not fake news. It's not a false flag. It did happen, but Russia is not allowing us to see it. So TASS, the Russian news agency, kind of fired back against us a little bit, looking further at this, and they're basically saying that the Western powers are freaking out because they haven't been able to prove this yet. So they said that the U.S. ambassador said that Russian experts had visited the site of the presumed chemical attack and cleaned up something there to help the Syrians cover up the tracks, he said, after the OPCW Executive Council session. We consider that as a clumsy attempt to cushion the blow in case it turns out that they have lied about what actually happened. Our American partners look to be nervous in frenzied efforts to find anything that could justify their steps in case their allegations about the use of chemical weapons in Syria prove to be false, Shulgin stressed. They are probably afraid that experts on the ground may refute their false theory that was used as pretext for a strike on helpless Syria, he added. So this is a very, very interesting development right here. And The Guardian also chimed in and stated that Russia and Syria is basically preventing them from getting access. Now, I don't know if that's true. I haven't read any evidence of this. In fact, there could be some issue, of course, along the way. We don't know. I've heard that Russia is even suspect of the OPCW or their methods. There was a number of things brought into it during the Security Council that America wanted to do things a specific way. This is why you had this kind of stalemate. You had a situation where none of the partners, proposes the draft proposals that they wrote up. They vetoed them, or they didn't get approved because there was enough loopholes and weird things in them that allowed one or the other side to benefit from it, basically. But so let's go back a little bit to Nikki Haley again and actually talk a little bit more, or listen in, I should say, a little bit more to some of her speeches and what she's been saying regarding Russia. What we listened to prior was before the strikes. This is, of course, the determination that they came to and they acted on their own. And then let's listen in after what she said after the strikes took place.
The time for talk ended last night. We're here today because 3 permanent members of the United Nations Security Council acted. The United Kingdom, France, and the United States acted, not as revenge, not as punishment, not as a symbolic show of force. We acted to deter the future use of chemical weapons by holding the Syrian regime responsible for its atrocities against humanity. We can all see that a Russian disinformation campaign is in full force this morning. But Russia's desperate attempts at deflection cannot change the facts. A large body of information indicates that the Syrian regime used chemical weapons in Duma on April 7th. There is clear information demonstrating Assad's culpability. The pictures of dead children were not fake news. They were the result of the Syrian regime's barbaric inhumanity. And they were the result of the regime and Russia's failure to live up to their international commitments to remove all chemical weapons from Syria. The United States, France, and the United Kingdom acted, after careful evaluation of these facts. The targets we selected were at the heart of the Syrian regime's illegal chemical weapons program. The strikes were carefully planned to minimize civilian casualties. The responses were justified, legitimate, and proportionate. The United States and its allies did everything we could to use the tools of diplomacy to get rid of Assad's arsenal of chemical weapons. We did not give diplomacy just one chance. We gave diplomacy chance after chance. 6 times. That's how many times Russia vetoed Security Council resolutions to address chemical weapons in Syria.
Well, okay, we could talk about this veto thing as well, but, this is how she twists it. This is how she lies and make things up and basically trying to... there were proposals by Russia to do an inspection and to do it in a proper way, but Nikki Haley and her cohorts, France and UK and many other members of the Security Council chimed in on this position as well, was that they were talking about that there must be a clear position where the UN Security Council takes a stance against chemical weapons. It's like, okay, but so the way that they wanted to do that is to punish Assad. So without proving that it actually was Assad or the Syrian government behind this, they wanted to punish them immediately. And of course, Russia said, no, they're a sovereign country, they're an elected government. We have to investigate if they actually did this. We can't just intervene, we can't just go in there militarily, this is illegal. And of course, they screw this, they said, we're going to go in anyway, we're going to bomb these people, we're going to strike all these locations where they just assume that there's chemical weapons. Again, where's the proof that there is chemical weapons in these facilities? Nothing. None of the journalists as well that were listening to these meetings by the Pentagon actually detailed and asked them the questions. Prove to us what's going on. Where is this alleged, it is an alleged chemical attack at this point, and they're just keep hammering that. Well, we're certain that we're confident in the evidence and stuff like that. Absolutely ridiculous. But so Nikki's little speechwriter is interesting. I think we should take a look at him as well. But just quickly regarding veto, because she did mention this, right? Vetoing, and that Russia had been super, difficult to deal with because they had vetoed things in the UN Security Council. Well, guess what? Guess which nation have vetoed things most in the Security Council? United States have vetoed the most things. So let's break this down and look at the details about this. Here's a story out of the Washington Report, who's of course reporting on Middle Eastern affairs. And they're showing an updated list of vetoes cast by the United States to shield Israel from criticism by the UN Security Council. So you can either pause this or you can go to the page, search for the title yourself and go through it. I'm not going to go through them all, but as you see here, there is a tremendous amount of times they were complaining on Russia, basically protecting Syria 6 times against aggression and against basically the reasoning of attacking Syria militarily before it was established that they were the guilty party. 6 times they've done this. And this, of course, is a declaration of war to Nikki Haley and the rest of them. This proves that, Russia is basically, they're enabling the murder of children, right? So now they want to impose sanctions on them and everything else. It's ridiculous. But anyway, and this situation, by the way, as you know, have been incredibly volatile. The way that this might have escalated, this is far from over. This is far from over. It's cooled off a little bit, but it's still very much an active conflict. But anyway, 42 times, as you can see. And this goes up to 2011. I think there's more after that. I think there's yet an updated list about up to 47 or something like that. But anyway, 42 times the U.S. have vetoed things just for Israel. I think the total was like 140 or something I heard on a report today of different matters. So the most difficult partner when it comes to the United Nations Security Council have obviously been the United States. They just steamrolls everyone else over it. So now when Russia actually puts down their foot and said, enough is enough, we're not going to take this bullshit and these false flags and these staged things and just go along with this, they of course are becoming the difficult party in the situation. So who is Nikki Haley really, and who is she talking on behalf for when she's sitting at the United Nations? Remember, she was a never Trump person before, and then of course she was positioned as the ambassador to the US at the UN. But anyway, her speech writer turns out is the wife of Jonah Goldberg, who runs National Review Online, and her name is Jessica Gavora. She's been, I think, involved in the Bush administration before, but she's the one, and this is actually not declared anywhere. I actually heard this on a Fox News report the other day, where Jonah Goldberg was the guest on this panel, and they were criticizing, Russia, and they were talking about how wonderful Nikki Haley was, of course. And then he said, Jonah Goldberg basically, well, I feel that I have to declare something. I have to mention this before I comment on it. It turns out that my wife is working for Nikki Haley, you see. So she's one of the speechwriters for Nikki and the UN, of course. Jonah Goldberg, of course, have interest in Israel. But really, the other most important person to check out here is actually John Lerner. He is a very important person in this equation for us to be able to figure out why Nikki has taken the stance that she has, and why she's so vehemently pro-Israel, why she's doing anything that basically the neocons want and stuff like that. So I found a couple of interesting articles that underline this a little bit more. 5 things you should know about Nikki Haley's. So here's from the foreword. 5 things you should know about Nikki Haley's Jewish right-hand man, John Lerner. Let's check out this article a little bit, and let's check what those 5 things are, shall we? He holds a senior position in the Trump administration, has made a name for himself as one of the most successful political consultants. Yet John Lerner manages to steer clear from the spotlight. Oh, he's hiding behind the curtain, as it were. Interesting. Currently serving as America's deputy ambassador to the United Nations under Nikki Haley. Lerner, 49, was recently described in a New York Times article as the, quote, #1 person Haley listens to. Interesting. And with speculations that Haley's political ambition could lead her all the way to the White House, Lerner is the man to follow. So he's basically the gray cardinal, as to call it. He's the guy behind the throne. And if Nikki Haley, who's of course a very good actor, a very good, narrator, basically, of reading a script, manages to advance it anywhere politically, we know that John Lerner is behind it. But here's a few facts then about him. He may pave Haley's road to the White House. The New York Magazine reported that Lerner has a long-term plan for Haley, and he is there to make sure nothing derails it. This long-term plan began back in South Carolina when Lerner manages Haley's 2010 successful gubernatorial race and maintained its momentum when she entered the Trump administration as top United Nations representative. Lerner was appointed deputy ambassador but stayed behind to run Haley's Washington office. It's important in the thick political mud of the UN to have folks around you that can be quick and strong. Former Senator Jim DeMint, who was one of Lerner's earlier clients, told Bloomberg, describing Lerner as having a very good strategic mind. It's about that lawyer mind, right? And as soon as something comes up in the United Nations, you can fire back really, really quick. And of course, you can twist the words, you can turn everything around, and in this kind of, you remember Worm Tongue from Lord of the Rings, in that kind of fashion, like holding the king under mental chains, basically. But anyway, so the next thing is he only takes clients who are conservative enough. Okay, conservative. I wonder what that means. Neocon, I guess. Lerner makes no secret of his conservative views, and these views guide him when choosing political campaigns to work on. He helped DeMint and other Tea Party candidates with the races in the Republican wave of 2010. Lerner, like Haley, was not an early Trump supporter. Exactly. They were actually never Trump. They worked very, very hard against Trump. But he followed Haley when she accepted Trump's offer to join his administration. I wonder why. Of course, it was to push an agenda of their own and to steer Trump away from America first, obviously, and adopt a more interventionist policy, which, of course, we've seen. The roots of Lerner's political ideology can be found in the global scene. My hostility to anti-American authoritarian governments that began with anti-communism remains my primary motivations, he told Bloomberg. And that's, of course, because he wants to use America as this police force internationally that can do the bidding of not only America itself, but other countries such as Israel. That manifests itself today in places that include North Korea, Iran, Syria, Cuba, Venezuela, and Russia. Gee, really. His mentor was Arthur Finkelstein. Lerner, according to a 2010 McClatchy profile, is a protege of the late Arthur Finkelstein, a legendary Republican political consultant known for his no-holds-barred style of campaigning. Finkelstein also advised Israel's Likud party, really, and was behind Benjamin Netanyahu's controversial campaign claiming his rivals would divide Jerusalem. I mean, just check that out. I mean, really? America first policy, Trump? These people are behind Nikki Haley, the guy that you appointed to, the woman that you appointed to, be on your representative to the United Nations. What the hell is going on here? He's an advisor to the Likud party. His mentor is an advisor to the Likud party and stuff like that. It's very interesting. Lerner isn't as blunt as his mentor. Yeah, I guess not, huh? He's more subtle about it. He holds the same views because he has Finkelstein as the big mentor and the big inspiration, the big role model here. But he's more quiet about it, you see. But the article goes on to say, but he's still known for hard-hitting campaign ads, hitting his rivals' shortfalls. Yeah. The last thing here is interesting. He doesn't campaign on Sabbat or Shabbat. An observant Jew, Lerner ends his work when the sun sets on Friday and does not go back to it before Shabbat is over, according to former clients. Lerner keeps his rule even at the tensest moments of a political campaign. He lives in Bethesda with his wife and 3 children. So now you know a little bit more about who's behind Nikki Haley, what his opinions are, and what he has actually been doing. But there's more here as well. There was a couple of developments that came to light a couple of days ago when John Bolton came in, first day on the job. Then the U.S. bombed Syria. A couple of days later was, or maybe it even wasn't his first day. I think it was on his second day or something like that. But the decision was made immediately. So he wanted to actually have John Lerner part of the new foreign policy team that Bolton wanted to set up. And he was actually going to divide, it says in this article, his half-time between being Nikki Haley's speechwriter at the UN and then running, together with Pence, his foreign policy team, and Bolton heading that up. But the latest thing that came out is that Vice President Mike Pence's choice to be his new national security advisor has withdrawn from consideration. We're talking about John Lerner here, after President Donald Trump got wind of the plan to hire someone associated with anti-Trump ads in the past. Well, Nikki Haley was also associated with anti-Trump ads in the past. So I don't know, she was a very outspoken never Trump person. So I don't know why maybe he knew who was behind much of this and that he was the brain behind it. And maybe he was trying to make sure that things isn't derailing as quickly as they could have potentially with this guy in there. I don't know, but the article goes on to say, the White House said John Lerner, an advisor to the U.S. ambassador to the United Nations, Nikki Haley, withdrew from the proposed dual role with the vice president. Alyssa Farah, a Pence spokeswoman, said that Pence holds Lerner, quote, in the highest regard and expressed deep gratitude for John's willingness to consider joining our team. So that's the guy who's been part of the strategy, of course, to writing these kinds of speeches for Nikki Haley and the way that she managed to twist and turn things. And she even went on Fox as well and kind of continued this line of reasoning. Let's listen to that.
Mission accomplished means something broader. And I think that the president was referring in military terms. We, of course, know that our work in Syria is not done. We know that it is now up to Bashar al-Assad on whether he's going to use chemical weapons again. And should he use it again, the president has made it very clear that the United States is locked and loaded and ready to go.
Locked and loaded. I can't believe she's even used this term in the UN at the UN Security Council as well. It's just unbelievable. I mean, she's just such a mouthpiece, and again, she's twisting. She just repeats and repeats and repeats and repeats and repeats that Assad, chemical weapons, he's responsible. And the reason we did this is to stop him from using chemical weapons. Well, guess what, lady? You have not even proven that he did it to begin with. You have to establish who did it in order to punish someone. And Russia has been willing to play ball, and they've agreed with this. If we can establish who did this, then yes, we can, the Security Council can take measures. But as we know now, she's not the one, behind all of this. It's the people like John Lerner and many of these other super pro-Israeli Zionists that are anti-Russia as hell. And they want to, of course, make sure that Russia doesn't team up and help Iran and help up teaming up with Syria and all this stuff. It's a big, geopolitical chess game that's being played right now, and it's being played out in Syria, because if you can dominate that region, things can go, either way. And of course, you want to make sure that these alliances kind of break up on both parts. So she's not the brains behind the operation, but she is the mouth. She is the mouthpiece. She is a propagandist and she's an actor. She reads these scripts that's handed to her in a very, eloquent way, I should say, in a convincing way, I should say, rather. And so, she repeats this in the most Orwellian sense that, Assad is guilty. Assad is the one who did this. And yet they have offered no proof. I mean, I can't stress this enough. What is the proof? What have they actually done to show that this is what the Syrian government did?
The president has made it very clear that when it comes to weapons of mass destruction, we have no tolerance for it. We are going to watch out for the best interests of the American people. And so he made a point, and hopefully Assad gets it. If Assad doesn't get it, it's going to hurt. And I think what General Mattis was saying was these strikes happened basically responding to their continued use of chemical weapons. But of course, if Assad continues to go forward, there will be more, and it will hurt. And I think that he has a lot to think about. Yeah,
see, they're trying to act like, well, Assad did this. We're helpless. We can't just can't him allow to do this kind of stuff. We haven't proven anything, but that doesn't matter. It's up to him now. If he continues to use chemical weapons, we'll attack again. We're locked and loaded, and we'll do this again. I mean, the lies here are just extraordinary. They're literally firing hundreds or tens of millions of dollars, about 100 million, a little bit over $100 million worth of missiles at Syria here, and have nothing to show for it. They have, in fact, on the international community and by independent journalists' standards, faked this whole thing. They've staged it. And I mean, you must establish whether or not someone did something before you try to punish someone for a crime. I mean, insurance claims are investigated more than this stuff. I mean, Nikki Haley, she is the mouthpiece of Israel. I mean, Sauron. Do you guys remember the mouthpiece in Lord of the Rings? That's Nikki Haley right there for you. That's what I'm thinking about. This is who I'm thinking about when I think of Nikki Haley. And, she's a liar, and it shows, and it's disgusting what she's doing. And, of course, she is completely... I mean, imagine this as well. I mean, she's second generation immigrant, technically. I don't know if she was born in America, if she was brought here by her parents, but she's going to push the United States of America's interest in the UN. I mean, seriously, what does she know? She doesn't care. I think she gets really well paid. She's a mouthpiece and a propagandist, and she does all the right things. She does, she goes and visits Israel, and she is approved by the whole AIPAC establishment, which is running America's foreign policy, and that would be, of course, a prerequisite for her to even end up in this position. So she's jumped through all the hoops. She's done all the right things. She's met with all the right people. She has been there and she's done that. She even went to a Holocaust memorial, and she paid tribute to what was happening there and stuff like that. And even look at that piece that's to the left of her there in the image, like this weird. That actually looks like something out of Lord of the Rings right there, doesn't it? This weird, deformed, just twisted iron with a fire in it. It's just so bizarre. They have all this stuff, but it was just interesting. That's just. It's a side note, but it's kind of funny. That's how I came to think of the mouthpiece out of, the Lord of the Rings, because it's like some of their memorials are just like that, just weird and twisted. And here's Trump, of course, being there as well, visiting that, showing his obedience, to those who run American foreign policy. So, there you have it. That's Nikki Haley. And so that's what she has been up to. And that's why she is in the position that she's in. And that's also why she's been lying so much, because it's on behalf of other people's interests in the region, in the Middle East. They hate Syria. They want to take Syria down. Nikki Haley doesn't have any personal invested interest in either United States of America. She doesn't, her family doesn't have a long-term association to the country. She's a newcomer, an immigrant by all standards. And so, of course, you should put people in positions like these that have an invested, emotional, ethnic attachment to the country to make the best out of the situation, to get someone who really cares. And the fact is she does not care. But anyway, let's move on. One of the things I was thinking about when I was witnessing all of this unfolding is the issue of so-called female power or feminism. Basically, that we have a number of women, powerful women, very high position women, prominent women in the West that have, taken over these roles from men. And I realized that most of the people that I've seen pushed for this war with Assad have been older women like Nikki Haley. But, you've seen some of these articles, right, that about female power and what we can expect as more and more women get involved. You've seen the articles like, would there be more peace if there were more women leaders? What if women ruled the world? And they're talking about how, more peace would be brought to the scene if these women were in control. But it's not only Nikki Haley, of course, that's a prominent woman, who's pushing for war with Assad. It's the likes of this lady, Karen Pierce, she's the United Kingdom representatives, but there's many others too. There's people sitting at CNN. It's unbelievable to see these, these peaceful women behind, pushing for Assad, and they're not the only ones. It's just a handful, but it's just an interesting reflection that these New Agers talking about when female power rules, it'll be peace, and it's men who's destructive and destroying the world and all this kind of stuff. Well, guess what? The majority of what I've seen, if you take it at face value, that the face that you see are the ones who are pushing the policies, then they are the warmongers. They're the ones who are pushing for this. Nothing has changed. In fact, and some of them are even worse, to be honest, and they hold nothing back, even if they do believe that they're doing it for the children or not. I don't care. It's their responsibility to make sure and find out that they are doing the right thing and that they're punishing the right people, if you will, in the equation. And they're not finding that out at all. They're just mouthpieces for the state and the government, and they make good money pushing these lies. So let's talk a bit about the strikes themselves and what the target actually was that the U.S. was targeting. Very little information has been released regarding the accuracy of not only the strikes, but of course the content, if you will, of the bunker and the above ground storage facility and this supposed scientific research center, which they bombed as well. A lot of fake footage was actually released the day off as well. People were posting like 2013 previous strikes between Israel and Syria. They posted old 2003 Iraq invasion footage even, and try to pose that off as being what actually happened over Damascus that night, that morning. But anyway, so 3 locations which they struck, right? So let's look at those a little bit, because this is an interesting thing to just check out briefly. There were 3 images released by the Pentagon, basically, which is of course the damage assessment, as they said. One was the Him-Shinsar chemical weapons storage facility. Again, no proof that that they stored chemicals here. Also, if they stored chemicals here and blew them up, is that going to release the chemicals? And so they actually put people in danger? I don't know, you tell me. Here's one of the supposed bunker sites. This is an underground storage facility. Here you see the Pentagon's image of this preliminary damage assessment of the Him-Shinsar CW chemical weapons bunker. And then, of course, you have the above ground facility as well. Here's the analysis, both in cost, but also the amount. And this is just, this is amazing when you break this down. A total of $140 million, $140.7 million in costs. And of course, then you have 66 Tomahawk missiles that was used. They are over $1 million a piece. Can you imagine that? Over $1 million a piece. And then you have 8 Storm Shadow missiles. They're also over $1 million. 19 JASM, they call them, missiles. These are fairly new, I guess. And then 12 cruise missiles. And of course, these were fired from a couple of different locations. Here is South Front, good YouTube channel. They're breaking down this for us here. So here we go. Those are all the locations that they fired from, right? So over 103 missiles were launched. And so what's interesting here is that there's a claim of intercept, that they've been intercepted, right? If they only went to 3 locations, how the hell is it that so little damage has been made? This is a failure of the mission, basically. Look at that, 76 missiles hit the Barza Research and Development Center. Then you had 22 missiles hit the chemical weapons storage site, and then 7 hit the supposed chemical weapons bunker. We could even take a look at a map. Let's check this out. And let's zoom in here and just let's take a look at the alleged chemical bunker that was hit. And just how small that is. This is the bunker, right? A tiny little piece, right? There's one target right there. This is outside of Homs, which is up here. So it's right down there. And you can see how small this is, like how insignificant. You have Homs right up here. But the other location, I believe, is down here. Here's the alleged chemical weapons storage facility that was bombed as well. And there was these buildings that you see here. But, you know, again, if you zoom out on a map, you see how small and insignificant this is of a target. And I'm not saying this to degrade the situation, but I'm also saying it because of what you're getting for over $100 million. We'll take a look at the last third target, which was, I guess, the most important one, if you will, as well. But for this, you know, for these costs, for this immense, just amazing amount of missiles, you get those 2 little targets that we looked at right there, just outside of Homs. And then, of course, the third target, which is the the research facility, the study center, basically. And there's been, you know, some contradictory information, as always, about this stuff. Who, you know, what did they do there and stuff like that. And I saw some tweets that looked like this. The scientific research centers in Damascus that the US-led strike hit earlier today from the inside, this person claims. Students, you know, research facilities, science, they were developing things, they were studying things, how to get, you know, clean drinking water and stuff like that. And I'm not discounting that they didn't have chemicals, but it might just be bullshit. It might be a bullshit target. That's all I'm saying. Some people are claiming that many of the missiles actually were intercepted along the way. I don't know if this is true. Here's South Front again. Plug them a little bit. They have a really good YouTube channel. They show you on a map who controls what area, what's happened, developments. So 76 super precise, you know, overwhelming success, you know, targeted these 3 buildings. It's a bit strange. So it is possible that the air defense systems that the Syrian Air Force defense has is this old, you know, Soviet basically issue, right? It's from the Soviet Union. They had bought a lot of these old, you know, S200 and S300. I think they have a couple. They have tons of them, but you know, there's some of them. And the theory was that they either worked well enough to take down some of these Tomahawks and stuff. Tomahawks apparently is an older missile. It's somewhat outdated, I hear. And they actually are meant to fly low below the radar, but they're fairly slow. And so, is it possible that some of these anti-ballistic missile, you know, defense, you know, weapons that they have managed to take them out? Well, I don't know. Again, the footage shows actually some of these, like this one. I don't know. I mean, some of the footage show, like you can see right there, them being explosions happening, and that they were intercepted. They hit something, unless they just randomly exploded in the sky. So, you know, South Front was speculating that basically there was tons of them that were intercepted. 71 of them, in fact, of the 103 were intercepted. And one theory was that they also got help, not by Russian, you know, anti-missile defense systems, but not weapons directly, but actually the radar system, or they used GPS or some kind of reconnaissance, basically, their own satellite monitoring reconnaissance net, where they provided this information in due time to the Syrian forces, and they managed to use that data to target them. That's a possibility that people have speculated about, and just also how much it cost them and how little they got for it, right? Again, we haven't seen any footage, as far as I know, from the bunkers and the above storage facility out of Homs, but we have seen, some footage from the research center, basically. And so, I don't know, you tell me. Complete waste of money. Absolutely amazing. We're not going to get America is not going to get a wall, of course. We don't have any money for that, but these strikes that happen all the time, no problem. You know, I mean, Trump did sign the omnibus bill amazing amount of money to the military and stuff like that. And so is this the continued bullshit that we're going to see from America? I just don't know. But in all reality, when we looked at the map on this thing, you realize just what, you know, we feel upset that it's like, you know, they've struck the whole country. They've attacked Syria, you know, but when you begin to zoom into these areas just outside of Homs here, those two small locations and this three buildings outside of a suburb of Damascus, you realize it's like, it's really nothing, to be honest. I mean, it's not good, but is it really that amazing what happened here? I mean, it's the thought, it's the idea, it's the audacity that they're doing this against a Syrian research facility on not only frivolous basis, on no basis whatsoever. It's just these intelligence reports that they have released, and nothing has come from it. No proof has come from this. So it is aggravating, but, you know, just to calm the situation a little bit, just looking at the map, you see how tiny of areas this is. But, you know, it should never have been done. I'm no way saying anything else, anything different. And it is an atrocity. But just to feel a bit better that it's like, you know, whoop-de-doo, like three locations. America wasted $100 million. I mean, they look stupid in this situation, especially if most of them were intercepted, which we just don't know at this point. So let's move quickly through the rest now. I just wanted to detail a little bit more about the White Helmet, some of these other organizations that were providing the supposed data to the United Nations, to the US, to UK, to France, and of course their assessment of the situation. One of the things, we talked about White Helmets already, of course. We know that this is a bullshit organization. They're receiving a lot of money from the West. They receive money to act as a propaganda outlet. Assad himself has said that they're Al-Qaeda, they're Al-Nusra Front. They shave their beards. They are, you know, posing as a help organization when in fact they are part of the rebels. There's some proof of this too. We'll take a look at some of that footage in a minute. But the one that specifically provided the detail about this latest attack in Douma, the supposed chemical attack, is a group called the Syrian American Medical Society, SAMS. There's an interesting article from TruthDig that I just want to read a little passage from for you so that you can understand just who these guys are. So the Syrian American Medical Society, SAMS, together with the White Helmets, SAMS have been cited by the Washington Post, New York Times, CNN, and virtually every Western media organization reporting on the incident in Douma. SAMS staff have claimed that they treated more than 500 people for symptoms indicative of exposure to a chemical agent. The group also played a central role in shaping the narrative of the sarin attack in Al-Qaeda-controlled Khan Sheikhoun in April 2017. That's the last time Trump sent missiles onto the country, providing biomedical samples for the Organization for the Prevention of Chemical Weapons, the OPCW, right? And this is this issue that this is why they're suspicious, Russia, because if they are working together with the OPCW, then they might be compromised. They might be getting their data from SAMS, and everyone thinks that they're a trustful organization, when in fact, they're also part of the conspiracy, if you will, of fuddling the numbers and providing wrong info and stuff like that. But anyway, so the article continues to say that when they're providing biomedical samples to the OPCW, which violated its stated protocol by accepting evidence without a verifiable chain of custody. So this is a pretty serious situation here. It says that scant published material is available on the organization's origin as an exile arm of the Islamist-oriented Syrian opposition, its involvement in sophisticated influence operations from the Turkish-Syrian border, or its close relationship to neoconservative elements in Washington and Al-Qaeda's affiliate in Syria. SAMS is not merely a group of Syrian doctors tending to the wounded in war-torn areas, nor can it be considered an objective source of chemical attacks or other atrocities. The organization is a U.S. aid-funded lobbying powerhouse that functions with a single-minded determination to stimulate a U.S.-led war of regime change that will place Syrian Islamists in power in Damascus, right? They want to oust Assad, and they're using SAMS to their advantage to do this. Goes on to say that the organization's budget jumped from $672,000 in 2013 to nearly, check this out, $6 million in 2015. Wow, that's a lot of money. Almost a tenfold increase. Over 5.8 million of that funding came from US Aid, an arm of the US State Department that boasts its own Office of Transition Initiatives to encourage regime change in stated targets by the West. So that's a little bit from that article. I just find that really interesting that, Truthdig digs out some of this out. US Aid, of course, is a big pawn or a big actor in the situation to create pawns such as SAMS. But so tons of money behind this organization. What's their stated goal? And same thing goes for the white helmets, right? That's why it's important that we look twice at this. And also the data, the science, the proof that comes to us, we can't just take it at face value either. It's even possible that the OPCW is compromised in some way, or rather that they are willing and naive enough to receive data from organizations which truly have a political agenda, an objective or regime change behind toppling Assad, of course. So as an example to this, let's take a look at a report out of RT that detailed what the Russian military of defense came out stating a while ago. They have talked about the fact that they are operations that are staged. This is why Nikki Haley was sitting in the UN talking about how it's not fake news and it's not a conspiracy and yada, yada, yada. Well, guess what? There's a lot of information behind this. And if you are open-minded, you should listen to both sides of this, of the argument here. And at this point, America hasn't offered much proof. America, UK, and France haven't offered much proof. It's circumstantial. They're just saying that they're looking at footage online, and they just say, well, Assad has chemical weapons, and the rebel groups possibly can't. So who else is it going to be, kind of thing? Now, actually, check out this report here from RT, and this was released by you 20 days or so before the supposed chemical attack actually took place. Check this out.
Russia's defense ministry says rebel groups have been armed with chemical weapons in Syria and are planning to stage false flag attacks as a pretext for the US to carry out airstrikes.
Representatives of the Russian armed forces have said they have reason to believe that the United States at its Al-Tanf base in Syria has been preparing squads of rebels, fighters, to stage a chemical provocation, a chemical weapons attack in the south of Syria, in Daraa, which borders Jordan and Israel. They've been provided, allegedly, as many as 20 tons of chlorine, as well as detonators disguised as cigarette packs. And this attack is imminent. Defense officials have said that this attack will be blamed on the Syrian government and will be used as an excuse by the United States and its allies to strike at Bashar al-Assad, his government and his military directly.
The provocations mentioned will be used as a pretext for the United States and its allies to conduct airstrikes against military and state infrastructure in Syria. We are seeing that such strikes are being prepared by warships in the Mediterranean, the Red Sea, and in the Persian Gulf.
At the same time, speaking in Astana, Sergei Lavrov, the Russian foreign minister, said that the Syrian conflict is beginning to look less like a proxy war than a direct confrontation.
There are US special forces on the ground. They are no longer denying this. They are accompanied by the British, French and special forces from other countries. It's not a proxy war anymore, but rather a direct involvement in the war. We condemn their illegal presence on Syria's territory. The US-led coalition is not legitimate from the UN point of view either. We are pragmatic people, and we understand that we should not engage in armed conflict with them.
Representatives of the Russian armed forces have also talked about the situation in East Ghouta, from which they say 47,000 civilians have fled in the last several weeks. They say there's a huge operation, humanitarian operation underway. 3 convoys of aid have gone into Ghouta as well, and they say the UN representatives on the ground in East Ghouta have praised the Russian and Syrian effort in relieving the situation there, providing food and other aid for civilians in need. They also say that armed groups in East Ghouta, as well as Islamists, have expressed a desire to leave East Ghouta for Idlib, for other locations, once their sponsors give the green light.
Wow, pretty incredible stuff. How the MOD, the military Russian Defense Department, Ministry of Defense, just openly talking about this now. It's pretty amazing stuff that it's staged and stuff. And obviously, I mean, we understand that there are things that would benefit them, etc. And there are things that, you know, agendas that they have, and no one is denying that. But I mean, just looking at it objectively between these two sides, I mean, Russia is telling the truth. They're just, I mean, they're more truthful. It's just a fact. These cover-ups and these lies and this bullshit, no proof from the Americans and their allies' side. It's just, I mean, I don't know how you can see it any different. But anyway, so, you know, Russia is the bad guy, and whatever they say, it's always going to be wrong. So you can't trust it, basically. But so yeah, this is more or less right according to the playbook, just as they said 20 days before. Pretty amazing stuff that they called this and that they were actually accurate on this. Location was a bit off, but they did go to Ghouta, and they were talking about how many civilians were actually being exported. You know, they fled from the area, basically, as the rebels were taking it over. And then Syria, with the help of Russia, started to push back against these rebels in Ghouta, specifically Jaish al-Islam. That's when this chemical attack happened. That's when this chlorine gas attack occurred, which of course incentivized America to get back into the game, knock Syria back into their position, and immediately you had not only ISIS but other organizations. By the way, I thought ISIS was out of there, but reports came out that ISIS started pushing back against the Syrian Arab forces right away, or the Arab army, and trying to fight back basically immediately and gain from the situation. It's pretty amazing. You know, you had U.S. instructors that supposedly had provided 20 tons of chlorine to rebel groups, according to this report. Just keep in mind here, though, that this is nothing new. This kind of stuff has been going on for years now, not only in Syria, but in other theaters and conflicts as well. Here's another example of the what the BBC ran in terms of a strange report. Check this out.
Dear United Nations, you're recalling peace. You're calling for peace. What kind of peace are you calling for? Don't you see this? Don't you see this? What do you need to see? We're just human beings. We want to live, you know? Isn't it our right to live? Isn't it?
In a basic hospital funded by handouts, the emergency beds were
calling peace. You're calling for peace. What kind of peace are you calling for? Don't you see this? Don't you see this? What do you need to see? We're just human beings. We want to live, you know? Isn't it our right to live? Isn't it?
In a basic hospital funded by handouts, the emergency beds were
This kind of stuff is happening all the time. There's many of these kind of staged things, but just keep in mind, you know, as we kind of continue talking about this too, that these rebel groups and stuff, they kidnap kids, they hold them hostage, they go after civilians. Here's an image of these Alawi kids literally being held in cages. You know, and you have to understand that when you see the kind of footage from, you know, for example, like the gassing of people, right? This was one of this footage that was released. The proof of Assad's brutality. This is why Trump called him an animal, right? He's just indiscriminately killing people like this. Well, the point is, this footage seemed to show that something was done to people that were being held in a I mean, it looks like a basement or something like that, to be honest. All these people, you see how many of them there is in a very small area as well. They have either run to try to hide in one same area, but there's no, you can't see any windows. It almost feels like these people were held hostage or kidnapped, including, my God, I mean, look at that, children and everything. And I'm not saying that these are not dead bodies. They are. So supposedly these chlorine canisters, the gas, the chemicals that was released was dropped from the sky, from a helicopter or from an airplane. We don't know. And it looked like some of the footage there that we don't see that much damage. It just looks like a small confined place. And so we don't know what's going on. But again, you can't trust it. Here's more. Another one actually where children are being used as well. And this is an interesting one. Check this out.
وسكان كلمة تجعلهم فريسة سهلة ولقمة سائغة لأفواه المتحاجرين العرب الذين لا يبلعون
Yeah, so it's kind of strange, right? Like, what is this? This is clearly staged, and I mean, what's going on here? This is an interesting story because it turns out this was not a staging as you would think of it. This was actually a school, although interestingly in the Ghouta region, that did a kind of a theater, an act to play for children so that they would become aware of how dangerous it is with chemical weapons, and also what happens if you are subjected to chemical weapons. Now, of course, it was filmed, so people assumed that it was like, well, this was obviously used, for so that it could be staged, right? RT had a piece about that. We'll go back to them again as a source. But you know, if RT was Russian propaganda for the sake of just propaganda, then a video that we just took a look at would in fact be used as propaganda because it would benefit, you know, the Russian regime to show that there are stagings and stuff like that. But it wasn't. They actually dug into it, and they dug into the truth of what this was. So it was, as I said, it was just a children's, not a play, but it was like, you know, a group came to the school to educate them about how dangerous it is with chemical weapons. It was like to, you know, an awareness and prevention kind of campaign, basically. So people had used this and said, well, this is more evidence it's staged and faked. But it wasn't that simple. You know, it shows that obviously that it can be done, and it shows that you have things like this going on in the region. But basically, this was not one of those cases. It was not run by a intelligence, you know, operative. It said rural Damascus media description of this video reads, the aim of the play was to teach children the horrors of being under attack by chemical weapons and to show the world its neglect and failure to take action on a man who would use such weapons against his own citizens, right? So yes, it was, you know, kind of anti-Assad and stuff like that, but it was not just a straight up staging. This was actually from 2013, and as you can see on your screen right there, this is the original video when it was released. As you can see, that's September 19th, 2013. And so this is what's going on with that video. But it is another example. It is one more kind of thing to add to the pile that these things kind of happen and people can use it, you know, to their advantage. But I respect the fact that, you know, RT dug into it and they found that it's like, no, it's not staged from an intelligence operative or for the purpose of claiming that this is against Assad, etc. But here is another one that we should ask questions about. Right? You see what's going on there? People are running into the scene, faking it. There was just a car bomb. They play on it, explode a car, and then, you know, the ambulances come in and stuff. And that was shot, I think, on a surveillance camera. Someone filmed the footage being played back. So this kind of stuff happens. I mean, it's war. The first casualty is truth in war, as we know, and this kind of stuff happens all the time. So you can't believe it. But let's talk about the white helmets, and just quickly, I want to show you that white helmets actually worked in together with ISIS people in ISIS territory. There was an interesting documentary made back in 2015 by a kidnapped British journalist who it's believed that they turned him to basically an ISIS operative, and he actually did a documentary where he showed some of this. Let's take a look at this and see if you can spot what's going on here.
Now, floating around in the skies above us is a drone. I don't know if you can just see it up there above my right shoulder, but there were drones in Mosul, and now there are drones flying overhead here in Al-Bab, just northeast of Halab. But life continues. The Mujahideen really don't care how many eyes in the sky are looking down on them. And at some point that drone will be taking photographs, dropping bombs or firing missiles. We're in the middle here of the market, which is a completely civilian area, and there's just been a large bomb strike on that building behind me. We heard the explosion. We were just about 5 minutes over that way. The fire brigade, Islamic State fire brigade are here trying to clear up the mess, but it's absolute pandemonium. And all this follows a drone which we saw 5 minutes ago, and then Assad's air force comes in and drops bombs on the market. Now, as far
he claims that the U.S. is working with Assad here to bomb, but check behind him there. It's pretty interesting. He's talking about the Islamic State Fire Brigade. He's in Aleppo, which is called, I guess, Halab in the local language. But you can see that Islamic State right behind them there. Look at that. And so they're called he's calling them the fire department of the Islamic State. They're in an ISIS-controlled area right here. And they're working hand in hand with the white helmets, right? Look at that. White helmets shows up, coordinating how to solve the situation, and right there even, look at that, I'm pausing. You have an ISIS dude running up, right? This is in that controlled area. So this is just very interesting. This is back in 2015, I think. They have supposedly been, I think they've been fought back from this region since then. But they're frauds. This is the proof. They're frauds. They're working with ISIS. And so just as, Assad has said in some of his clips, he's talking about how they are, he called them Al-Qaeda. I mean, it's the same group, Al-Qaeda, Al-Nusra Front, right? They've shaved their beards and they pose as humanitarians. And then this clip proves some of that. It shows that they're just, they're comfy next to each other and they're working together. Here's more what they found. Actually, I believe it was a French reporter after they pushed people back from Aleppo when it was liberated in 2016. Check this out.
Ça, c'est des uniformes. White helmets. Ok. Donc c'est le plus grand quartier général encore, je le répète. Et white helmets. C'est les casques. Ça, c'est Daesh, Jabhat al-Nusra. Ça, c'est les white helmets. Okay.
So, white helmets working together with al-Nusra and ISIS. Here's what some of the Western powers think of this group.
They are fantastically brave, these white helmets. I'm proud to say we're giving them another, I think, £32 million of funding as part of a wider £65 million package for non-humanitarian aid.
Yep, that's right. So Boris Johnson loves giving these people money. Isn't that good? Here's another British guy, by the way, going off script on Sky News. Let's just talk about media reception and how we in the West are receiving everything that's happening in Syria right now. Here's a guy he's a former head of British armed forces who kind of goes off script basically, and this is how Sky News reacts.
Do you think anything what we've heard from either Sergei Lavrov or indeed the Russian ambassador has made it more difficult for the UK to launch any kind of attack without putting it to Parliament?
Yeah, I think quite apart from all that, the debate that seems to be missing from this is, and this was actually mentioned by the ambassador, was what possible motive might have triggered Syria to launch a chemical attack at this time in this place. The Syrians are winning. Don't take my word for it. Take the American military's word for it. General Virgil, the head of CENTCOM, he said to Congress the other day, Assad has won this war, and we need to face that. So, and then you got last week the statement by Trump, or the tweet by Trump, that America had finished with ISIL and we were going to pull out soon, very soon. And then suddenly you go.
Okay, I'm very sorry. You've been very patient waiting for us, but we do need to leave it there. I'm very sorry. Thank you very much indeed.
Yeah, going off script, huh? Can't tell the truth. Absolutely amazing. These are vital, important positions that these guys or thoughts that these guys share, basically. So we could try to figure out the reasoning. Like, wait a minute, why would he do this? This is the most stupid thing ever. It's amazing. And then occasionally it slips out, and then they're of course cut off. Let's check another clip.
That made to appear that some chemical weapons were used. What appeared on to our investigation that was used by the opponents, by the rebels, and we have no indication at all that the government, Syria, the authority of the Syria government, have used chemical weapons.
So this reeks of a false flag operation.
Rebel forces have been accused many times of chemical weapons attacks in Syria. I myself visited a destroyed school in Aleppo last year where we saw evidence there that rebels had been using it as a chemical weapons making factory.
So let's keep watching some more media. Here's another example from CBS News. They're talking with Marcos Kounalakis. He is a foreign affairs columnist at McClatchy News. They're talking about Russia, the reaction, and also, of course, Trump weaved into this as well. Check out this guy.
I think that Russia, and when we talk about Russia, we're really talking about Vladimir Putin's Russia. What we're talking about is a Russia that is not informed at a domestic level about the attacks. There's a great deal of disinformation going on. So we're looking at how Putin and his team of cronies and his Defense Department are reacting to this. And what we see are two things. One is that for Putin, he is domestically strengthened by this because his population does not believe that, in fact, there was a chemical weapons attack. So he's able to build domestic support for his actions or his inactions and make the international community that has attacked, that means the United States, France, and Britain, look like the bad guys, right? The second thing is his position in Syria really doesn't change at this point. Nothing was attacked that would affect or degrade the Russian presence within Syria, where they are very active and they rely on Syria for naval basing and for other activity. They also do a fair amount of sales of their weaponry to Syria. So I don't expect to see anything different from Russia. Their disinformation campaign will continue. Their discrediting campaign of the West, whether it's in the United Nations or wider in the international community, will continue. And Russia comes out of this unscathed.
So, we've already detailed that, Russia has been on location. They have been done tests. They have, through the UN, initiated, basically an identification of the perpetrator to be made through resolutions. It's been denied by the U.S. And then the U.S. goes and does this transgression and illegal, firing of missiles onto Syria, a sovereign nation with a democratically elected leader that they're trying to topple. And of course, bozos like this have the audacity to talk about how they are the disinformation, people in this. So it's like, without even recognizing that the West hasn't provided any proof. They've not provided any proof. Look, can you give us some proof? What is the proof? More beyond conjecture and you just repeating it and saying it. So it's just not going to happen. So this guy actually believes that Assad did this because it would benefit Assad to pull Iran and Russia into it. So he's turned around the whole situation where basically no, there's no benefit for Assad for doing this because he knew that he would be punished by America and be dragged into it. And he's even stated in previous interviews that no, we didn't do this. We gave up our chemical weapons. We don't have an interest. Even if we had some, we wouldn't use them. And I believe the guy. I mean, look, comparing the track record of what the U.S. has done and how many leaders they've toppled, how many elections they've meddled in, how many countries they've invaded and deposed leaders and stuff like this. they have a track record of lying. As far as I know, I'm not saying that the other guys don't do that or whatever, but when this situation comes down to it, when it's down to the nuts and bolts of the issue, then these guys they're telling the truth. Russia is actually doing investigations. They're talking about them staging false flag attacks and stuff like that. So anyway, this guy's completely turned it on his head and says that it would benefit Assad because it would drag all these other powers into the situation, which is completely ludicrous. He's talking a bit later too, by the way, about Trump and how he views Trump afterwards. I bet you this guy was probably a never Trumper as well, but at this time they're all coming around to him. They're all thinking he's great, and in this case, everyone is teamed up. Everyone is on the same page. Liberals, progressive. It's actually more or less just as far as I've seen, the far left and more prominently the far right that has come out against this attack. Everyone who's a liberal in-betweener, an extreme centrist, as it were. They all agree with this. They want to see Assad toppled, no bars had. But let's listen to this part where he talks about Trump.
So this is really an interesting point, Errol, because what we're seeing with President Trump is what I think is really true, which is that he wants to actually withdraw from the Middle East. That is something that he's stated both during the campaign and, as you pointed out, very recently about getting out of Syria. On the other hand, you're seeing the reality of the international pressures and the humanitarian demands on the United States to remain in. So we're seeing some very odd movement in terms of what the president desires and how he's behaving. I'll give you one great example. This is the week that Donald Trump became a multilateralist. Not only did he enter into this Syria action with two other countries, two allies, France and Britain, but this is also the week when he instructed his team to try and re-enter TPP, the Trans-Pacific Partnership that he was so opposed to during the campaign. So
look at this guy. He's like excited about it. Oh my God, he's multilateralist, which is just a sanitized word for saying globalist, basically. Like, he's all excited about this. Finally, the guy's in. He's more presidential now than ever. I think even Saeed Khan, or whatever the hell his name is, on CNN, who said that after the first strike in 2017, he became the president now. It's like you got to bomb another country, and then you're truly legitimate. Then you're a president. These are maniacs, and this guy is just no different. A complete nutball who's excited about this. And if it's true that Trump will enter back into the TPP again, then, I mean, there's no more proof that we need that he is compromised at this point. Something has happened. You had that fire in Trump Tower. You had probably, I don't know, but his family might have been threatened, or he was threatened, where basically there's like, listen, you do what we tell you, or we will take out your family. We'll kill your son. We'll torture your wife. Who knows what he was told, but you could see it on the press conference when he was talking about making the strike against Syria, and he was, it didn't look like himself. That's all I can say. So I think that he's compromised. And of course, these nut job globalists are just, they're super excited about this. But last point, there's many allegations, many of the claims that we can break down of the proof. I did take a look at France paper. They released one, Hindsight, because there was some critique made against them regarding, the strike that they did. And there is some footage, of course, of their naval, the frigate that actually performed the attack. Here's some of this footage where they fired their Storm Shadow, was it the Scalp cruise missiles or something like that? And they did get a lot of pressure back home. No one liked what they did. They didn't run it through the parliament as usual. But Britain and France, they jumped up and down to do what America wanted, and it's very sad. But anyway, this document here, I did a Google Translate of it. It's by no means perfect, but it's enough to understand kind of the basics of what's going on. And in the document, they are literally talking about videos posted to social media as part of the proofs. They're basically talking all about the observations that were made. What happened? Here's, they're talking about the symptoms that they saw in the people in the videos. We went to social media, and they concluded that, well, It's far too prolific. There's too many sources that had videos posted to them at once. So therefore, it cannot have been staged or a hoax, which is just not true. That's just ridiculous. You could have a situation where, basically, you had a staging in the sense that something real happened, and then people actually were hurt or semi-hurt, or you had what one of the guys from the video that the Russian Minister of Defense released. They went and interviewed people and talked with them, 2 doctors that claimed that they were part of this, and they say that someone came in shouting that there was a chemical attack, and everyone started freaking out, and they started pouring water on each other. In other words, they thought that they were subjected to something, and then everyone were freaking out. But anyway, some of the videos, obviously, as we saw earlier, those in the basement, as long as that's real dead bodies, which it looks like it to me, and some other issues where they have respiratory problems that might have been subjected to something, or they were actually subjected to chlorine by the rebel forces. But anyway, so the French had looked at the symptoms. They detailed this in this document, how they had asphyxiation and suffocation, they had respiratory problems, they have salivation and stuff like that. And I went through the document, and they're basically just observing. They're observing what happened. And of course, if all the people were part of something or subjected to something, you could have a lot of people that were dragged into it who did take photos and videos, and they did put it online and stuff like that. It doesn't mean that it wasn't a setup or staged by rebels. It might have been real in that sense, but it was staged. It was like arranged to drag real people into it. So it would seem that way. But as I went through the document, there is no proof. They even talk here about like Jaish al-Islam and stuff like that. They talk about some of the groups that we're aware about, and they basically conclude that, well, they don't have access to chemical weapons, so it can't be anyone else then. It's just Assad that remains. But they have there's not a single proof in this document. And remember, Nikki Haley and also the UK people, they all kind of cross-referenced each other, America said, well, the UK and France have also concluded this. And then France says, well, America and UK have also concluded this. And the UK says, well, America and France have also concluded this. And they more or less basic on this circular logic where there's nothing outside of their little bubble that proves anything. So it's incredibly aggravating to see that people take this as face value, and all these mouthpieces in media and mainstream media don't really question. There's a couple of articles coming out now, like the one with Robert Fisk that we looked at earlier, but beyond that, there's not that much more. There isn't that much more from the mainstream media. And so they are losing face, they are losing credibility, they don't ask the questions. They have access to the Pentagon people, they have access to the inside information in many cases. They have a front row seat at the White House, at the Pentagon, at all these press events and stuff, but none of them are asking the real, heavy-hitting questions, which is like, you need to prove to us that this really happened. Present your evidence. Russia has done this time and time again. They had these, people at the Ministry of Defense that were talking about this. And I think as a last measure before we round things up here, let's take a look at that to see at least what they have claimed and what they have presented, which is more evidence. It's not 100%. It is not conclusive yet at this point. They've even said that they're going to present some of this evidence. But let's take a look at it, and you can judge for yourself what you think.
There have been allegations stated by the West against the Syrian government, saying that the Syrian government has used chemical weapons against the population of Syria. But up until this point, there has been no evidence presented by the West to lay some basis for the fact that there has been actually a chemical attack. We believe that there has been a provocation in order to provoke the US to make a strike against Syria. There is a video clip filmed in the hospital of the town of Duma, where allegedly people have been brought, people have suffered from the chemical attack. We have been able to find people in this clip, and these people will be telling in details how they were filmed, what they did, and how all of this operation was staged. They're going to show the film, they're going to show the clips, and both people are doctors, medical doctors, and work in the hospital of Duma. All the people brought to the hospital, according to these people, had no traces of suffering from a chemical attack. Once they were giving medical aid, when these people were giving medical aid, some people ran into the building shouting that those who had suffered and those who were receiving medical treatment were in fact poisoned by chemical weapons, and they started using water to try to wash them. Then they left the building. As you can see, these people are showing that they are present in the video. These people do not try to be anonymous. These are not some anonymous statements in the social media or some anonymous statements by some activists. These are actual people who became part of this staging. I would like to remind you that Russia has warned about the fact that there will be soon attempts to stage a chemical attack. Russia also possesses other evidence that shows that UK is involved in organizing this provocation in eastern Ghouta. We have information that from 3rd to the 6th of April, the so-called white helmets have been attempted. It was attempted to make them show that there has been a provocation. There was information about shelling near Damascus, and the white helmets were supposed to report this, and this was supposed to be a provocation.
So, no conclusive evidence yet, but at least Russians, the MOD has looked into it. They have sent people to location. They have had, other intelligence, but they have done interviews. They've been on location. There is some of that footage when they're walking around in the rubble. They're walking around with people and representatives on location. They are, meeting with officials in Syria. They're filming the buildings. They're looking around. They're checking things out. They're on location. They're trying to figure it out. And of course, this is what the West then went on to accuse them of destroying the evidence. So while they were there, they took away all the evidence of these chemical attacks so that nothing would so that they can't prove that this actually happened. So anyway, this drama is going to continue, and this is far from over. We just have to say the OPCW is going to do their job next. Hopefully they will be provided accurate information, and we know that this is a risk. We don't know if they're going to be provided with the right info, or if they're going to be taking info from another compromised organization that has ulterior motives. So we'll just have to see. We'll await that, but I think we should round things up for this time, and we'll keep you updated as things develop in this bizarre drama. Very interesting, and of course, as usual, highly volatile and dangerous situation. Well, guys, thank you so much for watching. If you are watching this on redicemembers.com, our members website, thank you so much for your support. We can't do this without you. I just want to say thank you to all your donations as well. We do need your help. We want you to sign up for a membership, get exclusive access to all our videos, see them there first, see our exclusive material like Weekend Warrior, but a lot of other stuff as well. The second hour of most of our interview shows that we do, so definitely check it out, redicemembers.com. All right, folks, we're going to wrap things up for this time. Just want to let you know as well that we are going to be ripping apart the studio shortly as well. We are going to be relocating to a bigger space. So if you want to help us out, definitely check out paypal.me/redice. That's a place where you can donate to us, or you can give cryptocurrencies as well. We have all the information down in the description below. Thank you to everyone who's helped us thus far, and thank you to everyone who's considering. We definitely need your help at this point. But yeah, we'll round things up for this time. Guys, we'll keep you updated regarding the studio move. We're going to be in a limbo here for about 4 weeks or so, potentially a little bit more. Then we're going to have things set up again, and we're kind of going to return to normal routine at that point. But ripping everything apart, taking everything apart is going to take a long time, and then we're not going to get into the new space until June 1st, I believe. So that's what's going to happen. But we'll bring you other kinds of videos in the meantime. We'll keep you guys updated and do as much as we can in the meantime. So thank you for understanding. Thank you for your patience as well. And as always, thank you for watching. We'll see you guys later. Take care.